So indentation is very important concept in Python. Without understanding this indentation concept, you cannot execute any piece of code in Python. This is very important concept before you try to understand the Python. So let us try to understand this indentation in detail. People who are familiar with C and Java languages will identify this for loop easily. Okay, let us try to get some brief introduction of the for loop. So to understand this concept, we will discuss the for loop in detail in the next videos. So okay, here we can see that for I is equal to 0, I less than 5, I plus plus, and this open bracket indicates this beginning of this for loop, and this closed bracket indicates ending of the for loop. So anything enclosed between this open and closed bracket belongs to this for loop. The main concept we are trying to understand is that the beginning and ending of a block. So here this for block, if you assume that a for is a block, this for block is beginning at this line and ending at this line. Anything between these lines or anything between these brackets belongs to this for loop. Whereas in Python, we don't have these kind of brackets to indicate the beginning and ending of for loop, or no brackets to indicate the beginning and ending of the if condition or anything. So in Python, we have the concept called indentation, which indicates the beginning and ending of a block. So let us try to understand the Python piece of code here to understand the indentation concept. Here, this for loop states that the I value ranges from 0 to 5. In the sense, the I value ranges from 0 to 5 minus 1, that is 0 to 4. In the sense, every iteration, the I value is incremented by 1. In the first iteration, the I value is 0. In the second iteration, the I value is 1. In the third iteration, the I value is 2, and so on. So here, when you try to observe this piece of code, for I in range of 0 to 1, this colon indicates beginning of this for loop. So please kindly observe that this colon, this semicolon indicates beginning of this for loop. So there is no way to find ending of the for loop. So let us try to understand what internally happens in this for loop. So anything here, when you try to observe that there is 4 spaces or a tab space here. 4 spaces or tab space indicates that this line of code is inside the for loop. Here we can also see that this statement also have 4 spaces at the beginning and or a tab space, which indicates that this line also belongs to this for loop. Here we can see the third line also have 4 spaces or a tab space at the beginning, which indicates this third line also falls under this for loop. Whereas when you try to observe this fourth and fifth line, these lines does not have any spaces before them. In the sense, these two lines not belongs to the for loop. So let me try to explain you in detail. So when you try to observe that, this indicates the beginning of the for loop. So how can we know how many lines are inside this for loop? To know that, we will use the concept called indentation. Indentation is nothing but a 4 spaces or a tab space. Here when you try to see that there are 4 spaces or a tab space before these 3 lines, which means these 3 lines will fall inside the for loop, whereas there is no space before these 2 lines. That's the reason these 2 lines does not fall inside the for loop. So okay, what is the difference between the lines inside the for loop and outside the for loop? So let us try to see the output and understand the difference between the lines inside the for loop and the lines outside the for loop. So here when you try to see the output, the lines inside the for loop are executed 4 times. Since as I said, this loop is executed 4 times for I equal to 0, I equal to 1, I equal to 2, I equal to 3, and I equal to 4. In the same way, these 3 lines are executed every time this for loop is executing. The for loop is used to execute a piece of code again and again until the condition is satisfied. Here the condition is I value is between 0 to 4. So these 3 lines in the for loop are executed every time this loop is iterated. In the sense, we can see that here the I value is initially 0 and the line inside the for loop is printed once and high is executed once. Here you can observe that we get 1 because the I value is incremented by 1. And the second line is inside the for loop, so it is executed again. And the third line, which is inside the for loop. How we can know this is inside the for loop? Because of this 4 line space indentation. So, and this high is inside the for loop, and again it is executed. And now I value becomes 2, and I is, when I try to print the I, now I value is 2. And the second line is executed inside the for loop, and the third line is again executed. And in the same way, this I value now become 3 and I value become 4. So when I value become 4, this loop is terminated because the condition is satisfied. That is, I value ranges from 0 to n minus 1, that is 0 to 4. The condition is satisfied. So the control flows out from this for loop. When it tries to flow out from the for loop, here the statement print, empty print. The empty print statement is used to print just an empty line. Here we can see that there is an empty line here, right? So this empty print statement is used to print a empty line here. Okay, I print this empty line so that we can see the difference. So here when you try to observe that the line which is outside the for loop is executed only once. So indentation is the thing that we use to differentiate the code inside a block and the code outside the block. So, okay, let us try to see some more examples to understand the indentation in detail. So, let us see another for loop which indicates what will happen if we violate the indentation rule. So, let us try to see the example here. So, here when you try to observe this first line falls under the for block. Why I am saying this falls under for block? Because it follows the 4-line indentation, which means this falls under first block. So, when you try to observe this code, there are two blocks in this code. The first block is the for block. This is block 1, and this print statement which does not have any spaces, which is considered to be a block 2. Here when you try to observe this middle line print hello, which is not even following in block 1. Why I am saying it is not following in block 1? Because it is not following the 4-line indentation. It is not following the 4-line indentation, and it is not falling under the second block. Why it is not following the second block? It is not even following the second block indentation. The normal indentation for a Python program is the border. So the default indentation for Python code is 0 spaces, that is the border. But this, when you try to observe this line, this is not falling either in the for loop because it is not following 4-line indentation, and it is not even falling under the default block statement, that is print hello. So this line is violating the indentation rule because either it has to follow the for block, which is 4 indentations, or it has to follow the normal indentation of a general statement. But it is not even following these two blocks. So that is the reason it produces an indentation error, which states that unident does not match any outer indentation level. It is not even matching the indentation level of this for loop, and it is not even matching the indentation level of this hello statement. So that's the reason we are stating that this print hello statement is not following indentation, so it raises indentation error. So let us try to understand this in the case of if statements. So here in this block of code, we can see that first I try to initialize the I value to 12. So I initialized I value to 12. Now I will give you some brief introduction about if. If statement is used to validate a condition. Here, what is the condition that I am trying to validate? If I is greater than or equal, if I is greater than 10. So here when you try to observe that the value in the I is 12 and 12 is greater than 10, the condition is satisfied. So only when the condition is satisfied, the content in the if block is executed, or the code inside the if block is executed. Let us try to find which piece of code is inside the if block. Here when you try to see that only this line is inside the if block. Why I am saying that only this line is inside the if block? Because it is following the indentation, that is 4 spaces or a tab space. So everything which follows indentation after the beginning, here this colon indicates beginning, as I said. So after the beginning of the if block, the lines which follows the 4 space indentation or the tab space indentation are said to be inside the if block. Here you can see that only the line after the beginning of this if block is following the 4 space indentation. So that's the reason this print hello guys is inside the if block. Here when you try to observe this print by statement, which is not following any 4 space indentation, so it is not falling inside the if block. This print by statement is outside the if block. So now let us try to execute this block of lines so that we can see the output. Here when I executed this block of statement, we can see that both hello guys and by is printed. Hello guys is printed because I equal to 12, and it is great. This is satisfying the condition 12 is greater than 10. So that's the reason this hello guys is printed, and this print by is a normal statement which is not inside this if block, but it's a normal statement. So that's the reason it's executed. So now let us try to make some change in this piece of code so that we can see some variation here. Okay, here now I try to change the I value to 1. So now let us try to see what will be the output. So now I am executing this block of code. So when I try to execute this block of code, you can see that we got only by as output. We didn't got hello guys as output because here the if condition fails. So you can see that I value is 1 and 1 is not greater than 10. This if condition fails. So the lines inside this if block are not executed because the condition has got failed. So we know that this indicates beginning, and the only line which follows the indentation for this if block is this line, 4 space indentation. So that's the reason this line has not got executed because the condition has failed. So this print by statement, which is not inside this for loop, it is following the general indentation for a Python program. So that's the reason the print by line is only executed here.